Hello and welcome to Command Point. I'm Shane. I am here with my co-host Ryan and our analyst Sean Perry, who's back on the grind after a little bit of an absence. How you doing, Sean?
Yeah, doing well. It's good to be back.
It's good to have you back on. Ryan, how's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Very good, very good. So today we are doing a new series, as you guys can already see because you've already clicked on the video. It is called Metawatch. This might sound a little bit familiar to you guys that follow 40K and follow the Warhammer community articles that they do called Metawatch. And unfortunately, there's nothing like that they make for Kill Team. So I thought it would be kind of an interesting idea for us to do our own sort of Metawatch where we break down some of the interesting topics that come out of looking at the results of a tournament. The most current one being WWO, which just ended. And we've got all that data here for you. We're going to have graphics up on the screen. It's going to be very fun. And I thought a cool way to start would be breaking it into not factions or tiers or anything, but looking at Imperium factions, Xenos factions, and Chaos factions. So today we're going to talk about Imperium factions. So there should be a nice little infographic up on the screen that's just showing the Imperium factions that did get played in WWO. There actually weren't a lot of them. We've got Astra Militarum right at the top with 13 and 10, a 57% win rate. Does this surprise anybody?
No, not really.
They were kind of the hot hand this tournament. I think there was like
Yeah,
half of the top eight was basically the same Astra Militarum list with like a few tweaks here and there.
which definitely tells you something about that faction, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, people used to talk about Eldar in the same way that for basically the same types of performances that we see now from Militarum. So hey, it's a strong faction. But once you get past Astra Militarum, it seems like the Imperium faction struggled a little bit. I think they were probably the worst performing, I guess, like category of teams that you can look at. The next highest win rate, albeit a small sample size, is Grey Knights, who took home a 40% win rate. So, I mean, Grey Knights, I wouldn't have anticipated on a hold format we're ever going to be that strong, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, not really. I mean, especially at 100 points, that's five bodies. Um, so we're not.
Maximum, yeah.
Yeah.
it's
So
it's
not
a
really.
miracle they got 40% win rate. Honestly,
Yeah, and it's that kind of just part of hold. And you're gonna, we'll probably see that as we go forward too, looking through all these different categories of factions. Is that when we dig in closer, it's bodies matter. So, when we look at these factions in front of us right now, Guard or Astra Militarum had bodies, or had at least the opportunity to have lots of bodies, and they came out on top with the win percentage here. And then once we got down to the more elite teams, not so much. AdMech maybe being the outlier there, but is also a single player. Um, so, at some point we need to maybe not look at it as necessarily a faction problem, but maybe this was that player's first time out with them. Maybe it was just bad dice, bad matchups. Lots of things happen. You can't really make too strong a judgment based on a single player's showing in one tournament.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to look a little bit at Adeptus Astartes. It feels like every tournament, not every tournament, but most tournaments that we look at, Adeptus Astartes usually have a lower than 50% win rate. They're not an easy team to play. We've said that before, but I think the current meta of hold, they struggle with it for kind of the same reasons Grey Knights do. Maybe they have a little bit of a better go than Grey Knights. They can take a few more bodies, but they're an elite team, right? I mean, they have very clear weaknesses. They can't easily hold two and more on a consistent basis, anyway. Um, and I mean, you can look and see the sub factions that were played for Adeptus Astartes, and it's all over the place. There isn't really a solid go-to for 100 points Nova style. You've got Ultramarines, you've got Space Wolves, you've got White Scars and Templars. It's it's all over the place for Astartes, and I'm not even sure where I would start if I was going to go into this format with this faction. What do you guys think?
yeah, I'm not really sure either. I was about to ask you, what do you what sub faction for Space Marines do you think would we have seen have the most success here? It's that's kind of a difficult question actually, because a lot of them, like, they really just like give you some sort of like benefit in like combat, like maybe Iron Hands because of the 6-up invuln that grants you for all your models, but I don't know.
Would this be where you go for you either go movement, so what's that, white scars, or you go kind of counter meta with that Blood Angel style that you ran, Shane? Just anticipation of seeing a lot of T3 kind of lots of body kind of armies in a hold.
That's the first place my mind went, was Blood Angels, to try and beat the hordes that were kind of expected. Um, I don't even know how well it would have done, because I mean the most dominant things here were Militarum, who are kind of a weird challenge in themselves. They're not like a horde per se the way they're played, and Tau, who are T4. So I mean they're a horde, but there's so many of them, and they're not that, they're pretty durable for what they are. So I mean it's a tough call. They definitely would have done well against like stuff like demons and harlequins and orcs, which did well at this tournament. So maybe Blood Angels would be the way to go. But I think what you're saying about White Scars too is worth considering. I think both of those, movement is really important in a format where you need to hold like like desperately, and you're not that rewarded for killing. So I think that would probably be the way I went if I took it, but nobody took Blood Angels at this tournament. There was one White Scars, but it was a mixed roster, so it's hard to say. Next, we've got Deathwatch, 2 and 4, 33% win rate. Deathwatch are another one like Astartes where they don't usually have great performances at tournaments, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They they are,
consistently struggle.
yeah, they're like Astartes, um, in the sense that I think like they can take a few more bodies than Grey Knights potentially, and they have tools to really punish horde teams.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's the biggest thing that would intrigue me about Deathwatch is, getting what, 4 gunners, some combination of flamers um and
Frag
frag
cannons.
cannons. Yeah, just to kind of mow down hordes and hope that you can get them to shove all their bodies close to each other and just split shots. Because I mean, that's kind of like a frag cannon's dream, right? Is getting like 5 gaunts or orcs or something like all bunched together in a hallway and arena and just
Right.
like getting rid of all of them at once, um, or at least rolling 5 injury rolls or something. But yeah, I don't know. They, like any other elite army at 100 and hold. It's so tricky.
I almost feel like the way to go with Deathwatch would have been leaning on maybe special issue ammunition a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, I mean,
I like the idea of that.
it lets you take more bodies. Um, and the special issue ammo is really only good against like T3 anyway. Like you're not gonna do that much against some of the tougher models with special issue ammunition. Like the most you're gonna get is like AP2 on like strength 4, whereas against um, like T3 you might not need the AP. You can go for the wound on 2s, or you can just add 1 to make sure you hit, and you're already wounding on 3s. And you just get more, right? You can get a lot more bulk gun guys than frag cannon guys. So I don't know, just a thought. It's not easy to run a team like Deathwatch in this format at all. Yeah. So and then Adeptus Mechanicus, we kind of touched on it already. One player, they went 1 and 3. Admech are, they're weird, right? I mean, they can only take so much. They're like a weirdly expensive faction for what they are. Um, Not that they're bad, obviously. They're a very good faction. We've seen that in the past. But I think they're a lot better at 125 than 100. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They're, I don't know, it's like everything they get, I feel like, is pretty vulnerable. Is just kind of like glass cannon E. They don't really have that many defensive buffs. Well, actually, no, that's not true at all. They have the 6-up feel no pain, and then um they have Shroud Psalm to help protect them against ranged attacks. I don't know. They're hard to build for arena and for open, which is a struggle that every faction has had. It's just the top performing factions obviously had a much easier go at it.
Yeah, I mean, Like yeah, like even like the Skitarii guys, which are like their chaff, I guess you would say, are like
Right.
what are they like 10 points, something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
9 I think for like a ranger.
it's a bit tough to balance, I think, because I mean those Sicarians and the priests are super versatile models. They can do whatever, but you can only take so many
Yeah.
before you start to drop in model count. And like it's especially hard to get like at 125, you can get a decent amount of models while still having a couple of those elite guys and a couple plasma calibers at least. But at 100, you got to kind of pick one, or else you're going to drop too low in models, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you think that their win rate here is representative of the faction, or do you think it's just because of the small sample size we have here?
Definitely the sample size, but also I don't think they would. I think it would have been really hard to go deep with AdMech at this tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that seems very matchup dependent. Um, because they have the weaponry to take out some of those other elite teams that we saw struggle, at least in this graphic. Um, uh, but when it comes down to a numbers game, it's like, sure, shoot my gaunt with a plasma gun if you want. I have more. So at the end of the day, it's gonna have matchup problems.
Yeah.
yeah. So overall win loss for Imperium at WWO: 23 wins, 30 losses. Not the greatest. The Imperium has it's seen better days than this tournament for sure. I wanted to talk a little bit about like I mean I'd say the big prevailing thing here is Astra Militarum. Um, and for the listeners that haven't seen or I guess listened to our interview with Micromancer who went TAO with Astra Militarum, um, maybe we could talk a little bit about that build. It's kind of yeah, it's like the big successful thing here on the Imperium sheet, but it kind of like defined this whole tournament, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't get away with it, and you could not expect to do well in this tournament if you did not have a plan for taking on Blackstone Guard.
I mean, almost who all the Blackstone guard for the most part got eliminated by beer in it. It didn't seem like anybody else did have a plan for it,
No,
or at least not a good answer. Maybe they had a plan, but there's only so much you can do, right?
right.
So for those of you that aren't aware, the list is basically it's Gottfried, a Tempester with a power fist a lot of the time. Sometimes you don't take them. A sergeant with either a chainsword or a power sword, and then just like a mix of gunners. And I think the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to include Rhine and Rouse in here as well. I think Micro is the only one bringing Ryan and Rouse, and if you're in the right position, so like maybe on what's it called, Arena, you can bring Pius Warren. Probably not on the open board unless you're against like a pure melee team. Then you can probably take Pius no problem. But yeah, and I mean, I think this is the strongest build out there right now. I think Biren had found a really good matchup with Tau against it, um, and he really figured that matchup out. Whereas I don't get the impression that anything else can even Tau can't reliably beat Astra Militarum, but I don't feel like anything can reliably beat this team, right? I mean, what other team is even similar to that Blackstone Guard team?
Like the closest thing that I could think of, honestly, would be Asuryani with their high quality shooting, damage output, and movement capabilities. But uh, Asuryani, they're a lot weaker comparatively just because of Godfrey. You know, that Godfrey model, it just brings what is already a good faction and it puts them over the top to S tier in practically every format that we've seen in competitive kill team.
Yeah, I mean, it's Godfred is weird, and I think Astra Militarum too are a faction where I think they're going to get better once you go to 125. Whereas I don't feel like that Tau list is going to get better because once you start adding in so many shield drones against other 125 teams, it's kind of diminishing returns. Whereas Militarum, they get more gunners, they can bring a Bulgrin all of a sudden and like double down on that durability. Um, yeah, I mean Gottfried is always good. Ryan and Rouse I think are always good. Just about it's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, no Astra Militarum teams to my knowledge went 4-0 in the Swiss stage. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you think we could touch on with the Imperium factions, or do you think that pretty much wraps it up?
I think this is the big hunt for the perfect packet, right? So we have some elite teams that struggled at 100 points in a hold packet. So this is where we see our highest concentration of elite factions in one kind of category in terms of Imperium, Chaos, and Xenos. So I don't know. I think that's when we look forward to the next packet to see how the next little tweak can even things out a little bit more. Because yeah, there's not a lot of data here, but as you said in the beginning, it's not too surprising. Obviously when it's one player, there's a lot that can be accounted for there. But yeah.
One other thing I wanted to touch on is are a few Imperium teams that were not brought to WWO. I'm just going to run down them, and we can quickly touch on how we think they would have done or whatever. So right at the top, there's Custodes. I don't think they would probably have done well. There's only 3 of them. This is a hold
No.
packet.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Custodes here?
None.
Good riddance.
Okay. Adeptus Sororitas, Sisters of Battle. What do we think of that?
Yeah, I mean,
They strike me as super glass cannony. And so that's kind of cause for concern. I think you can make a good roster out of like 9 bodies, just with those arcoflagellants.
Well, the problem is at 125, you pretty much always hit 9 bodies, but at 100, you can't really
Yeah.
get past 7. I've noticed.
Yeah. And then if you're taking Sisters of Battle, you're going to be taking Gottfried, because you can just take Gottfried.
Yeah.
Um, and then that screws up your list building like further. So it's like, I think they would have done well, honestly, just because of Gottfried. Like I'm not even lying. That's how strong that model is. I think they would have done well. I think they would have done better than Grey Knights at least. Not as well as Imperial Guard though.
and then at what point is it just a less good
Version of Astra
military list?
Militarum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, they kind of have their own identity. They're a lot more close combat oriented,
Mhm.
with the Endurant and the Arcoflagellants. Um, so they play different. They have their own identity, but when your whole list is revolving around Gottfried sucks the identity out of any faction.
Yeah. There is something to be said. A 7-man Sororitas team is usually still going to have like upwards of 12 plus wounds,
Yeah, right.
because every Arco with 2 wounds, Gottfried with 3, you might have Pius in there with 2. It's I mean, there's a lot of wounds to go around on that team.
Yeah,
Not much in
they're
the way of armor saves.
they're
or
deceptively durable in that
Yeah,
way.
and they're all T3. So in certain matchups, they can be really hard to displace,
Hmm.
get off the board. But against other teams, they're really easy to kill, and they fall apart pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean they've got their 2 gunners too, but
Right.
just the 2. It's not nearly as much as what you're getting with Militarum, but it's something. Let's move down. There are definitely
There's Sisters of Silence.
Yes, there are Sisters of Silence, and then there's one other one that I'll touch on at the very end. Sisters of Silence, I think. I mean, looking at this sheet, I think they kind of like what we were saying about Sororitas. I think they would have done okay.
Look, if you look at the kind of what I was said before with the Blood Angels and just having a decent matchup against T3, they probably would have done okay, right? In terms of having slightly more bodies than some of the other elite teams, but getting out lots of bolter shots and the flamers, right? Just lots
Yeah,
of strength 4 shooting. Could have been okay in what may have been a T3 body heavy meta.
for sure. The biggest thing to me, the weakness that they have is they don't have any answer to plasma. They hate plasma. They like you point a plasma gun at them and they fall apart, right? They always win on 2s. You don't even have to overcharge. They have no invulns. They're all 1 wound models. Um, and in a firefight, the bolt guns are okay, but they're not going to match up to a gun line of plasma. They are really effective, though, like you said, at taking out T3 teams and dealing with hordes. And they can get 8 bodies. They can get more than Sororitas. Granted, they're going to have less wounds overall, but I mean, it is, there's something to be said for that.
They could have done well against Thousand Suns. I mean, but
I was gonna say, wasn't there a little chatter beforehand of that being the secret weapon with the double sorcerer meta that didn't really happen?
Yeah.
yep.
I mean, yeah, that is true. We did have a Thousand Suns player go 4-0. And I mean, Thousand Suns ended up doing okay at this tournament. They weren't amazing, but definitely they would have had a really good matchup against them for sure. And Demons too. Demons are another Psyker team that made top 8.
Yeah.
Sisters of Silence would have been great against Demons. Really good against Demons, actually. It's probably one of the worst matchups I can think of for that faction.
I'm convinced that Sisters of Silence are a sleeper.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
convinced. Maybe not in this format, just because because Tau presents such a unique challenge. But against like all the other T3 factions, it's like they have great answers for them.
yeah, and it's interesting too because I think in the grand scheme of competitive kill team, plasma spam has kind of fallen out of the meta for what it's worth. Like the plasma spam teams are like Admech and Militarum, and Militarum has kind of moved on to the Blackstone Guard,
Yeah.
whereas Admech has they're never going to be like a commonly played army as good as they are. Just for whatever reason, you don't see that many Admech players. So I mean, yeah, Sisters of Silence they're interesting. And the last one, if this even counts, Elucidian Starstriders.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've been played once at our tournaments all year. So we can still talk about them if you want. Is there much to say? Probably not.
No.
They,
I have literally nothing to say. I don't know anything about that
Thanks,
team.
nothing to
yeah,
say.
they're, yeah. I don't know what to say about Star Striders. They are not a great team. They are a notch above Kroot. So there you go. Kroot were actually played at this tournament. So Kroot,
Yeah,
I think
so I would say
Yeah.
that Crude's better than Star Striders on this packet.
maybe. Yeah, they take more bodies. Star Striders might be the worst team on this bracket, possibly. Um, I don't know though.
I think Custodes would be.
Yeah, Custodes are definitely in that ballpark. Yeah, so I think that wraps it up for the Imperium chat. This episode of our own little Metawatch that I so desperately wish Games Workshop did. So I figured we'd just do it ourselves. Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
I mean, that seems to be the story of Kill Team, right? We'll just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, so true. So true.
Yeah.
Oh,
Unfortunately. Alrighty. So thank you all for listening. There will be more episodes of Metawatch to come where we break down the Xenos and Chaos. I don't want to call it factions, but Xenos and Chaos.
umbrellas.
Yes, umbrellas, and
Allegiances, maybe.
yeah, and talk about their performance in the World Wide Open. So thank you guys for listening. Shout out to all of our patrons over on Patreon. You guys are the best. If you're not following us on Patreon and there's even a little bit of interest, you can follow us and watch the exclusive Patreon series that I do, Inside Shane's Brain. It's a lot of work and people seem to like it. So maybe come check it out. And thank you to all of our subscribers. Have a good day, guys.